welcome back to Beholder to No One, a D&D/TTRPG podcast. Today I am here with my friend Adam from Snyders Return. Hello.
Hi, Nikki. Thank you for having me.
Adam, I met through Awfully Queer Heroes, I believe. And yeah, we've just been talking a lot lately.
Yeah, I think we've sort of orbited around in the same sort of podcast space on various social media, but I would agree with you. I believe it's through the Awfully Queer Heroes that we actually sort of formally met as best we can.
Yeah, where we actually were like, oh, hey, I recognize this person. Now I know who you are, more than just like, you're just a person on Twitter.
There's just another profile I follow and try and keep up with. So no, it's been really good to sort of engage with you and get to know you a lot better through mutual friends, should we say.
Yes. So today we're going to talk about a topic that we haven't actually discussed in a really long time, and that's just podcasting in general. Not necessarily a focus on tabletop, but we are both podcasters for tabletop RPGs or D&D based systems. So we're just going to talk about that and like the trials and tribulations and what we've learned, I guess, in the process of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we are continuing to learn as I continue to learn.
Always learning. Always learning. So tell us a little bit about Snyder's Return.
Thank you. So yeah, Snyders Return is a tabletop interviews and actual play podcast. We try and release episodes sort of Tuesdays and Thursdays, and relatively recently we've tried to do some collaborations and sort of cross-pollinate with other tabletop gaming systems, other podcasters, and like Twitch streamers or other actual plays to try and sort of help support and grow the community that we are both and so many others are part of. So we have been able to speak to some amazing content creators, and we have been able to put out some good, some ropey actual play due to some technical issues and learning how to be podcasters and how to move into that actual play space. So, you know, we're streets behind where you are, Nikki, but we're learning and making headway and making new friends as we go.
It's always weird to hear because, like, I know I've been doing this for a little bit, been like a year and 2 months now, but I am ages different from where I was a year ago, and I'm still learning. Like, there's still days where I'm like, how do I do this thing? Like, how do I market? Like, how do I ask for sponsorships? How do I do all these things that I like? How do I reach out to people without like having an anxiety attack?
Absolutely. I think that's been one of the big challenges of growing outside of the podcast entity and reaching out to other people. That has been it was probably one of the biggest steps that we had to take personally, and as you mentioned there, but it has opened so many doors just moving into a bigger pool, as it were.
Yes, 100%. And like honestly, a lot of the people that I met have been through Twitter, which I've mentioned before. And literally, I just posted, I was gathering friends and I picked mutuals first, people that I have actually talked to. And I remember like the first time somebody reached out to me, like, hey, can I be on your show to show X? And I'm like, why do you want to be on my show? Like, are you sure you meant my show? Like, are you sure? Right. Sure.
You didn't stutter? You've read the title correctly. You mean our show? You really? You sure?
Positive. Talk about the same show. But it was just really funny. And then one thing I did learn, and something that I would like to emphasize with newbies in the field, or just even people who've been doing it for a while, don't always say yes. Don't just say yes. Try to do a little bit of research first. Like if you know the person, if you've talked to them for a while and you trust the person, then go by all means. Bring them on a show, have a conversation. And this is specifically related to discussions, but also like guests on your actual plays.
Yeah.
Or on tabletop games. But there have been times where I've had to say no to a guest because I looked over the content that they were providing or wanted to discuss, or I looked over some of their tweets that they had. And I'm just like, oh, no, because then they would be associated with us in a small way. And it's not always a bad thing, but it could be.
Yeah, it's a fine line to tread. Not you want these guests, you want to be able to sort of spread the proverbial wings and move on up, and one guest could lead to two or three different guests and sort of spiral outwards from there. But if you, as you mentioned, if you get associated with the wrong guest, or someone has the wrong impression of your show because of a guest, you could find yourself sort of pigeonholed, or I don't want to say sort of blackballed or blacklisted in that respect, but it could make things more difficult for sure.
I think it depends on how you react to it, honestly.
Mm.
But yes, it's just you need to protect your brand in a small way, and obviously you can't catch everything. You can't be like paranoid about it and go 15 years into their Twitter feed to make sure they've never said anything wrong. But like whenever I have somebody on the show that wants to like show off their content, I always ask to see the stuff beforehand.
Mm.
Because if I want to read through it or even just glance through it and make sure like there's nothing in there that's going to be problematic or make me uncomfortable or something I don't want to promote. And it's very rare that I will say like, no thanks. Like, sorry, I don't feel comfortable with this episode. But I have had to back out of being a guest of another show once because of something that was done on their show. And I'm just like, nope, sorry, I can't be associated with that. I'm out. Have good luck.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you'd certainly have to, because, and I know it's not true of all podcasters, but many like yourself and us, we are small groups of friends or associates. There's no big corporation, there's no money pot, there's nothing to back you up. The only thing that keeps this going is yourself, and therefore
Yep.
you are your brand, and you have every right to protect that and put safeguards in. So absolutely agree with you there, Nikki. We've been lucky in respect that I've reached out to content creators before I was probably ready to be honest,
Mm-hmm.
and took gambles, and was lucky enough to have a few of them say yes and come on the show, and that gave me the confidence to then continue to reach out.
That's something I need to work on. Like the phrase "shoot your shot," basically, or like
Shoot for the moon and all that sort of stuff.
shoot for the moon or aim high. Like the worst case scenario they can say is no, as long as you're respectful. I've reached out to a couple of bigger name people and was either ignored or they never saw the message. There was one person that was supposed to be on the show and they agreed to be on the show and then never responded to the actual date. So that it was just kind of disappointing more than anything. But I also know that a lot of the bigger name people will agree to be like a guest maybe, but not do something bigger until you can provide payment, which is 100% accurate. Like they're right. And I get it 1000%. I wish I could pay everybody to be on this show, but Nikki's broke.
Yeah, I mean, and that brings up another part that maybe people don't realize is tied into podcasting. Yes, you can do it on a budget and you can put out good content, but there are things like, depending on the service you use, paying for the upload, paying for background music, paying for any ad spots you may sort of wish to try and get into, equipment if you are starting from nothing. There's such an unseen outlay, not only in cost but also in time, that I don't know if everybody appreciates that. And I'm not saying, oh, it's a podcast, you must understand everything, because I don't know everything that goes into TV production or movie production.
Right.
But I respect the craft enough to think that's not something I'm just going to jump into and assume I know everything.
You could technically start on a shoestring budget if you get a cheap microphone that has clear audio, preferably. A lot of people start with Snowballs, which is like a $50 microphone, but even those aren't the best thing in the world, but it'll do. Audacity is free. Anchor.fm is free. Like with those three things and your time, you could create a podcast very easily. All you have to buy technically is a microphone, but it might not sound as good as you would want it to. But if you listen to almost any podcast, mine included, almost every single actual play I've ever listened to, the first couple of episodes aren't the best sounding audio-wise. You improve over time. You buy better equipment over time because you're like, oh, I'm going to do this for a little bit. You get a fancy webcam so you can be on streams, and you get fancy editing equipment because it's faster. But you don't have to have those things. Those are
No, not
just
at all.
nice.
Yeah, definitely. The more I continue and we as a entity as Snyders Return sort of continue to create and put out content, the more I want to have time cut down on editing. So we'll look for different software. I upgraded from a simple USB microphone similar to, well, mine was an Amazon's basic gamer microphone to start with, and it was functional, but I knew it didn't sound right, and I knew if I wanted to be confident in what I was putting forward and we were putting out, that I needed to get a better sound quality. So I chose to upgrade the microphone to an XLR mic, and to my ear, if nobody else can hear it, but to my ear, the audio quality is improved, and that gives me confidence then to keep reaching out and trying new projects, approaching new people, speaking to people such as yourself, which I may not have had the confidence to do if I'd not taken certain steps beforehand.
Right. And I was the same way. My first microphone was a snowball microphone, and it picked up everything in the background, even like raindrops outside. And it was just like, oh my Jesus, why? Future editing Nikki's gonna hate this. I upgraded to I think it was a CO1U Pro, which was the cheapest nice microphone, quote unquote, that they had at Sam Ash, which is a music store. But ultimately, then I upgraded to a Blue Yeti X, I believe, is what I have, because it has a mute function. But I went with that option because I've seen my friends use it, and I'm like, hey, do you like that? Like, I've heard your audio quality. Your audio quality is fantastic. Do you like that microphone? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, okay. And it was a little bit more expensive. It was like the CO1U Pro was like $100. And the Blue Yeti X, I think, is like 170 maybe. But the mute function alone is a godsend. Like, it is so useful because, one, it like, you cannot mute on Audacity when you're recording. You can't mute your Audacity. So even if you mute yourself on Discord, which is where I usually record, all those coughing, the shifting around, the typing, the clicking, like all of that stuff is picked up. And then if you have to use your backup audio, you have to edit all of that stuff out.
Yes.
Yeah, mute buttons are a freaking godsend.
In many respects, wish the microphone I had, do have, would have a mute function instead of I have to sort of move it away from my mouth and sit very still, and I make all horrible, and I'm sure you find it, and many other podcasts will find it, that sort of lip smacking sound and the harsh sort of plosives from certain words, and when I start a new sentence, that there's almost like an abrupt T sound every so often. That's all. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, and
There's another one.
There's ways to fix that too. Like if you get a pop filter, that will help minimize those things. There's like I bought a foam cover for my microphone, and it kind of toned down a little bit of my P's and T's and stuff like that. I didn't really want a pop filter because I like to be close enough to my mic because I'm very soft spoken. But I turned the gain up on my mic to about like medium level, so it makes me significantly louder than what I would be normally, which is super helpful.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's something else that I've learned, and I'm clearly you have the sort of adjustment of settings and sort of microphone position, how to address the microphone. You know, when I started interviews and started sort of DMing over the mic, I'd be too close or I'd be too far back, and you could hear the sound changing as I moved in position and I shuffled in my chair and things like that. So that sort of, I haven't perfected a breathing technique yet. That's probably something in the future to work on, sort of seating position and control of breath.
Yeah.
But I'm better than I was, far better.
100%. And one thing that I've noticed that I still need to work on is I will take, when I'm in the middle of discussions, I'll take a breath, like right before I take a sentence, and then I'm increasing my audio later, so that breath is a lot more noticeable. So it makes it feel more natural, but some people might not want that. They might want to cut those out, and that's just extra work. Also, if you have somebody who is going to eat, like right now I have food sitting right next to me that I would really like to chew on, but then I have to talk with a mouthful of food, which is going to be like, it's very easy to tell. Like when I listen back to my audio that I'm editing and I'm like, what was I eating at that point? I think Keith brought me pizza. Yep, I was eating pizza. That's what it was. And like, you can tell that like I was like, oh no, I need to jump into the conversation, but I'm also chewing. Sorry.
Smooth.
So smooth.
The crinkly bags of chips or sweets or candy or whatever it is that someone else may be using, you can hear that and you can spot it in a waveform, and it is humorous and yet aggravating at times, if I'm polite in how I phrase that to my players. So, but I've enjoyed taking up this challenge. It was nothing that I thought it would be, and yet it's so much more than I ever dreamed it would be.
1000%.
So as a group, we got into this tabletop role playing through watching the end of season 1 of Critical Role and stuff like that, and then there was a bit of a lull where we just played, and then I was like, oh, I've been listening to this podcast and that podcast, and a few of the others have been listening to podcasts. I'm like, well, why don't we have a go? Why don't we try it? What's the worst that can happen? No one listens to it, and we've tried.
Yeah.
And it has just snowballed from that. So I don't know how you sort of stepped into this side of content creation and podcasting.
Honestly, podcasting in general, I didn't listen to podcasts before. I listened to Critical Role, but that wasn't my reason for starting this podcast specifically. I watched Critical Role on YouTube, and I enjoyed it. And I think I didn't start listening to Taz until after I started my podcast, I think. But when I ultimately started because I wanted to talk about one of my favorite passions. I really, really enjoy D&D and tabletop games to a point that is almost an obsession. But like, there's only so many times you can tell your spouse things.
Yes.
So it was just like, okay, I need to talk to other people who also like D&D. And at first, I just pulled in friends, just random friends. I'm like, hey, buddy, you want to be on my show? We could just talk about whatever. And some of those episodes were really nice. Some were a little awkward when I had rando people at first and I didn't know them. I've gotten significantly better at talking to people I don't know 100%. But at the beginning, I'm like, oh, this is awkward. How do I talk? How do I... people. But ultimately, it led to, okay, maybe I need a co-host. Didn't really vibe with the co-host. I took a break, came back with a different co-host. It was going fine. And that's when Twitter started. And I realized, oh, well, I can just invite people from the community. People love to talk about themselves. People love to have an opportunity to discuss their favorite topic, discuss their favorite passion, discuss their own podcast, and get a little bit of a shout out. It was just kind of a win-win. Like, I got a guest, they got a shout out, both win.
Absolutely.
And then eventually I always wanted to add an actual play, because what's the point of a D&D podcast if you don't have an actual play and play D&D? Or that was my logic. You can have a discussion podcast without an actual play, 100%. So I wanted to play D&D on the show, but it was like thankfully my friends were like, okay, let's do that. And this was like my best friend, my husband, my best friend's husband, and then a mutual friend. And it's been working out with Behold Clearlight. And then the tabletop one-shots were literally like, that was supposed to be a Patreon thing. And I didn't want to make it a Patreon thing because I wanted to do indie games. I wanted to play TTRPG games that I had never heard of. So I could shout these TTRPG games out and say, look, play this game. This game is awesome. This game is wonderful. If it was hidden behind a paywall, then people wouldn't see it.
Yeah.
So I just decided to add a third show, since we are only posting bi-weekly anyway for the whole Clearlight. It just made sense. And I think actually the tabletop stuff came slightly before Clearlight, but I don't remember the exact order. But now that I've done all three, I've like this, like, I can't imagine not doing all three, even though I'm tired.
Yeah, it's certainly a labor of love in that respect. And as you say, you're sort of putting out 3 shows. Consistency of releases I've found has helped, even though at times I've found that I may have taken on too much at times, and I'm sort of putting in longer out. I probably spend more time working on the podcast than I technically do working. That is because I want to give it my all and put as much in, and clearly the commitment you put into Clearlight and the other projects really shows and reflects from your listeners and followers and things like that.
Yeah, and that's one thing I will say to anybody who's listening to this. If you want to run a podcast, do it. Have fun. Be respectful. 100%. That's rule number 1. Be respectful. Don't make a podcast to be an asshole to somebody else. But the other biggest rule, beyond the obvious of common sense and respect, you need to edit your podcast. I don't care. You need to edit it. You can possibly get away with it if you are a stream and you just are putting the stream up. But if you don't want to edit, do a live stream. It has its own pros and cons.
Definitely. So, and you mentioned about having a Patreon and paywalls and things. That's something that I think we definitely made that mistake. We didn't start a Patreon to make money, but it was like, oh, we have a podcast, let's have this. And it's something that I need to spend some time updating and sort of looking at and reassessing, because at the moment it sits dormant and provides value to nobody other than Patreon, I guess, who potentially get something off of it. I don't know.
I mean, they don't get anything unless you get something.
Yeah. So it's doing nothing for nobody at the moment. But that's another facet, and there's so many other options out there once you feel is comfortable for you, and again, it comes back to your self-perception and reputation and how you want to present yourself, whether you choose to have something like Patreon, or if you're going to push down a Kickstarter route for projects that you may have coming up and things like that.
Yeah.
So there are so many options out there for podcasters and podcasts to be individuals as well as part of this big community that we're all part of, and hopefully, from what I've seen, all support each other.
Yes. The next big important thing I would say is, if you are not going to do it yourself, aka editing, music, art, you need to pay the person that you are getting it from. Artists are not free. Do not ask them to do the work for free. Just find an artist that is in your price range, that has an art style that you like, or if they're more expensive, save up for them. They might be worth it. But like, don't be that guy that's like, hey, can you give me a discount? I can't really afford your $200 price. It's like, okay, well then that artist isn't for you. Like, pick a different artist or save up $200.
That's it. You do need to have patience, I would say, doing this, whether it comes to scheduling games with players who, we all have lives away from the microphones, away from the editing software. So sometimes
okay.
your play, fair. Maybe. Sometimes life will step in and present you opportunities to try something different with fewer players, or catch up with some editing, get ahead with some editing, which is something I'm sure you would agree with me is a brilliant idea.
Yes.
Get yourself clear and a little bit of breathing room.
I see a lot of people who, they don't really have a choice because of the position that they're in, but they have to wait until the last minute, and then they stress about it, and they have to work like 8-9 hours in a row instead of like breaking that up over a course of a week or two. in order to get a product out, period. And for me, I have done that before. I have previously, when I was editing the discussions, I would wait till the Sunday before. And my anxiety was terrible because of it. Because I'm like, my issue for me specifically is I get migraines occasionally, and I'm out for the count if I have a migraine. So if I decide, oh, I'm just going to edit it on Sunday, and then I wake up on Sunday with a migraine, I have to edit now through a migraine. Oof. Which is 10 times harder than editing without a migraine, where if I would have just edited it earlier, then I would have been fine. So my goal usually is to get it done at the absolute latest the Sunday prior, because I edit the episodes that go out on Thursdays. So my goal is to edit it by Sunday night. There have been occasions where it took a little longer to edit the episode because of problems that happened, and that's fine, but usually my goal is by Sunday night. And then if I have free time and I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll work on the next one. And I can start editing. Like, I'm currently 2 weeks ahead working on my third one. And by Thursday, I'll be 2 weeks ahead, hopefully, if I finish the one I'm currently working on. So if I can maintain this 2 weeks ahead thing and possibly get further ahead, then that is less anxiety on me if something happens or if I need to focus on something else instead.
Yeah, definitely. And if you are able to and you need a break, perhaps, and this isn't directly you, Nikki, this is just in general. The start of this year, we took a month off, but instead of just not releasing anything, we reached out to other people in the community and said, look, why don't we put one of your introductory shows in, an episode where you can find new listeners potentially, because we all want to help each other and support each other. So we had some shows send over an episode which was a good stepping on point for new listeners, and that gave us a month to do our best so we could put our house in order, as it were, get ahead with some editing, sort of plan and plot and reach out to guests and things like that, so we could hit the ground running when the new month rolled in.
Honestly, that's a really good idea.
It was great, and we've been lucky to sort of, again, as you mentioned, sort of building that rapport with people. That has allowed us to sort of keep up and join Discord servers and sort of really engage with people there and know people on a social level beyond just, oh, there's this podcast, let's say hi, kind of thing. We're sort of building up more personal bonds, which can only be a good thing for the future.
Yeah. And one of the biggest things I've learned is you need to root for other people's successes as well. It's not just about you. Well, yeah, sure, I want my podcast to succeed. I want it to do great. I would love to make this a full-time thing where I get paid enough that I don't have to go to my day job. Sure. But I also get very excited when I see my friends hit milestones or get more Patreons than I would ever think of having. Like, you have to be just as excited for them as you would be for yourself without ignoring your successes too. Like, it's a balance, and never use other people's successes to get something. That's just rude.
Yes.
It's like, oh, I see you interviewed that really interesting person. You want to hook a girl up? You want to let me want to put a word in so I can talk to them too? Like, no, like, just chill. Reach out the appropriate way.
Yeah, work on your own merit. It will get you more respect and could get you more benefits in the future. And we were and have been knocked back from time to time, same as you mentioned, Nikki, that maybe they didn't see the message, maybe because we haven't been going, we're less than a year old as a podcast, but we've been lucky enough to speak to some amazing people, and some people don't have the time for us at the moment, or maybe don't see us as a reputable entity just yet. But we've got days, weeks, months, years to build up a rapport and hopefully a favorable reputation, both within the community and things. And you were saying about not measuring against other people's successes. As long as the downloads that I see we use Buzzsprout, but whatever it is you use, as long as it goes from 1 to 2, because 1 is normally me, So as long as someone else is downloading it, I've put out something that somebody wants to listen to.
Yeah, it still astonishes me when I get downloads. Like, it got to a point where it's like I was so hyper focused on the numbers that it was affecting me more than it should have. And I could easily compare myself to somebody else. Like, I know of another podcast that's doing very well, and I won't say anything. It's nothing negative to them. I'm so happy that they're succeeding. They are doing 10, 15 times better than I am in the pure number of downloads. But it's a different circumstance. It's not the same type of show. It has people that are already known. So there's a lot of things like that you need to remember. People look at Critical Role in like the Adventure Zone and they're like, oh, well, look how much they succeeded. I'm like, yeah, but Critical Role started on Geek and Sundry, which already had a platform. And they were all already well-known voice actors. So people started to listen because they're like, oh, I recognize that voice. I know that person from this video game. I know that person from this anime. Whereas they have like 10, 12 years under their belts that they've been doing this.
Absolutely.
I highly doubt 10, 12 years ago they were as good as they are now. And if they were, it's probably because they had a dad who was in radio for his whole life. So they had things that you didn't necessarily have. So it's a bad comparison. So you can never compare yourself to that. Like, I have no background in talking in the public. I have no background in podcasting or radio broadcasting or anything like that. I was just like, I want to start a podcast, I think.
Yeah.
And then I had a friend encourage it. And I'm like, okay.
Just takes a nudge. And sometimes that's all it needs. And, even our success, and you mentioned before about your own, from the moment you started putting sort of voice down a microphone to where we both are now, respectively, on this day of recording, both of us have gone through different journeys with respect to podcasting, but we're still both achieving. We're still both putting out things that we are proud of, and we have progressed, and we continue to learn and grow and reach out and hopefully better ourselves, and hopefully put a smile on at least somebody's face.
Yeah.
My own, definitely.
It always amazes me, even when it's like, if I see somebody download, I'm like, oh, cool, somebody downloaded. When somebody actually messages me and they're like, I remember the first time someone's like, hey, I'm a really big fan. And I'm like, what? I don't understand what that means. What do you mean a fan? Like, I'm what? And they're like, I really like your show. And I'm like, are you sure? Do you mean another show that's called Beholder to something or other? It was just a little weird. It was like, oh, okay. How do I panic? Okay, panic time. Because it becomes like real.
Yeah. There's so much support out there that people are happy to support content creators, be it a sort of something similar to a purely interview based or discussion based podcast, or whether it's an actual play. There is an audience out there for everybody. Sometimes it's going to take time to find that sort of niche you fall into. Sometimes you may adapt slightly to find or create the niche, but there will be someone out there for your podcast.
And I think that's actually a good segue into, like, don't be afraid of change. Like, my show, for example, as I stated, it was just a discussion show, once a week discussions, and then I added on the other things because I wanted to do them. And when I found out that Behold Clearlight will eventually end, which is inevitable, I had to have this like existential crisis, basically, where I had to like learn the difference between producing a show and playing a game. And that's something that's hard, I think, at first, because you need to treat this like a show. You need to treat this like a job a little bit. You need to be like respectful. You need to be on time. You need to like do what you need to do. And the people you work with need to do that as well. So there are times where like somebody needs to leave and you need to figure out what to do with that. Whether they're going to leave the game and you have to just replace them, or if you need to end the game and find a new game to take over after that. Which is what we're ultimately doing. And Adam will be DMing for us the next show. We don't know when that will start yet, or what it's 100% going to be about, or who's going to be in it. But we started discussing it.
Absolutely, and it's something I'm excited for, just to get to work with other people, other podcasters, have the opportunity to DM and run games for new players, and respond to new interpretations of how to play characters, and how to use mechanics in different and hopefully, and I'm sure, inventive ways.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're working together to put some things into place, and build on those foundations, until it's ready to be played, and I'm looking forward to helping with not only sort of DMing it, but any other part of the process that we need to work together on. So it's good, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Me too. Like, I'm excited, and like I've been working with Alex as well. Alex, the DM 89, who was just on the show the first, I think, was when the episode released. Alex is going to be a DM for a future Vampire the Masquerade game that we've been discussing as well for Beholder to No One. And that's been in discussion for a bit, and we've been super excited and working on characters, and that one we have our team and we have a little bit more, but we've also known about it for a little bit longer. So there's always something going on behind the scenes to, at least in my experiences, to improve the show, to improve your content, whether it's learning how to edit better, or learning how to perform better, or talk better, or whatever. Learning how to not say as much, even though you can edit those out.
Yeah.
Side note, if you say a lot, try not to go and. Like, try not to go and into another word, because those are a lot harder to break out.
Agreed.
If you just say and then pause and then continue, it's just an easy cut. But there's so many words that are like, so then I gotta I'm just like, no, I can't cut that. That's in there forever, because it's gonna just sound weird if I cut it now.
As an abrupt start of a new word.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, if, and I mean no disrespect to people when I say this, but if you're not going through an editing, or learning about editing, or you're not looking to run the next game, or reaching out to other content creators or other friends to try new things, if you're not innovating your show in one way or another, then you're doing yourself a disservice. You're almost going to go backwards, because you might stop, and then that opportunity to play with this person, or speak with that person, or get that 2-3 weeks ahead, could pass you by.
Mm-hmm.
The wheel has to keep on turning in one way or another, and it doesn't always have to be right next game, next session. Maybe it's right next editing, next guest, next promo trailer that we're hoping to make. Even if, make a promo trailer to send out to other shows. Once you start reaching out on, you mentioned it earlier, Twitter has been such a fantastic platform for us to reach out, and not only engage with and find out about, but invite people on, and sort of build up that respect and rapport. It's
1000%.
one thing, because when we started, I reached out to people I thought were well beyond us as a podcast, and we've had some really fortunate guests, and the ones that weren't able to come on straight away gave us some sound advice, no pun intended, to being a podcast. Things like having a sort of pre-made interview request, or request to come on, so it looked polite and formal, it read well, it wasn't just a sort of slapdash, please come on our show, ? It was more formalized, getting a couple of weeks ahead. One of the shows that I adore, they work in sort of film editing, filmography and film editing. Another show, they are, or at least their editor is a professional sort of radio and sound engineer. So they were able to provide, while they couldn't come on initially, or it took some time, or we had to wait for certain schedulings to align, they were still kind enough to give their experience in one way or another. People would generally not say no to helping you as long as you are helping yourself.
And as long as you're polite.
Yeah, absolutely. That politeness, that respect, it goes far further than follower numbers, download numbers, anything like that. If you present yourself in a way that someone will respect you for it, they are more likely to come and be a guest.
I remember so when I bought Adobe Audition, because that's what I currently use to edit, which has downsides, that the fact that it costs money per month. So maybe not your cup of tea. That's fine. When I originally got it, though, I got it because I was used to Adobe products. And I had a friend or two that use it professionally. So I'm like, hey, can you give me a brief rundown of what I would need to know? What are some of the things, some of the tricks and tips that you've learned, or some of the things that I just need to know what that means? And somebody sat with me for like an hour and just walked me through the basics on how to use the program so I could just start. And that was such a helpful thing. And then later, I was watching somebody edit on stream on Twitch, and it was Steven the Bad DM from Forge Academy. And that's his actual username, the Bad DM. I'm not calling him a bad DM. He was editing on Reaper, and I was debating at that point to try Reaper because Reaper is like a one-time purchase type deal. But you do need to purchase like some side things potentially to make it more useful. And I was like, I would love to learn how to use Reaper one day and see if it's a better fit for me so I could save money. And he's like, okay, I'll teach you. Just jump on the stream and I can answer any questions that you have. Like, people are willing to help you.
Yeah.
As long as you are trying to help yourself too. You also like be aware that you can Google a lot of these things too. There are times where I just ask, I'm like, what is the name of it, the thing when it looks like this? And like, I'll put a print screen because I just don't know the name, the wording, the proper verbiage. So then once I know the word, I'm like, okay, I know what to Google for now to find the answer I was looking for. I think it was mono that I couldn't remember. Like I remembered stereo, but I was like, what's the one where it's only one of them? They're like, mono? I'm like, oh yeah, that's it. Thanks.
I'm all over it now. I'm all over it. The time that people are willing to give in one way or another has been astounding. So, you know, we've mentioned it a number of times. But it will take time to get quicker, which will then cost you time because you'll be editing more stuff that you have ready to edit. So it's a balancing act, absolutely. And if you can find a willing volunteer to edit for you that edits your podcast in a way that you are happy with, then fantastic. But as you've said, Nikki, you need to either be really good friends with this person or be paying them, supporting them and their time.
I've learned that the rare times that somebody's willing to help is when they're in the show. So if you are doing an actual play, for example, see if one of your players are willing to learn how to help edit. See if one of your players are willing to help with the transcripts. See if one of your players are willing to help with social media. Like, ask them to help in a sense. But there's also, like, for me in my situation, it's like, this is my baby. And it's hard to ask other people to do things for it. Like Greg, I appreciate because he edits the discussion episodes, and that saves me at least 3 hours a week that I wouldn't normally have. And he's on the Behold Clearlight episode still, and he was on the discussions. So technically he doesn't have to do that anymore, but he's still willing to do it for me, which I severely appreciate. And I know he's listening to this because he's going to be editing it.
Thank you, Greg.
Thanks, Greg. Did you wait till Sunday, the day before? I bet you did. I bet you did. No, I'm kidding. It's just keep in mind that your players may not be willing to assist, or they may not be able to assist. Maybe they don't have a computer that's good enough to do editing. Maybe they don't have the skill set required and aren't really willing to learn. And then it might fall on you or fall on one or two people. And that makes it a little bit more difficult, but it is still doable.
Yes, I will attest to that.
One thing that, and you and I have discussed this before, I just need to do it. One thing that I've been wanting to do is transcripts for a while. But whenever I look at the thought of transcripts, my brain is like, when do I have time? Like, even with programs that will do most of it for you, you still need to go through it and clean it up. And then I'm like, okay, that's 3 hours a week, and it's going to take probably at least double that to actually read through it and make sure it's right and blah, blah, blah. It's like, I don't have that kind of time. So it's finding the time to make it happen or getting someone else on the team to do it if they can.
And then sort of building on the transcripts point, well, where do you put them next? Some podcast apps will let you to tack one on, but are you going to start a website or a web page, a blog, or having this information available is amazing, but you have to think about how you're going to sort of curate it and present it so people will engage with it, because that's ultimately what you want. You could put out 100 podcast episodes plus transcripts, but if people don't know where to look or don't know how to find it or the best way to engage with it, you're not going to have that continual sort of listener follow you through.
I've noticed for me, I promote the show about 2 to 3 times a week. Occasionally, if we're having a low download day, I might promote it again another time. But usually I will, if the people that I've gotten to actually listen to the show or the people that I've talked to them in person, not in person, but one-on-ones or in a group setting. And I'm sure I've gotten people to listen because of me promoting it and them seeing it and whatever, but a lot of times I was just talking about it. I was just talking about D&D in general, and then the podcast happened to come up because they're like, "Oh, so what do you do on your free time?" And I'm like, "Mostly edit my podcast, or record for my podcast." And it's not me bragging and trying to convince them to listen. It's just, it came up in conversation. And then they're like, "Oh, what's your podcast about? What's it called? Let me listen to it." I'm like, "Oh, okay. Go ahead and listen. I don't care." Ironically, I mentioned it to the chef at the cafe at my work this morning. I'm just like, I want to be home editing right now, honestly. And he's like, "Editing what?" I'm like, "My podcast." And he's like, "Oh, you have a podcast? What's it about?" And I'm like, "Dungeons and Dragons." And he's like, "Oh, that's cool. What's it called?"
That's it. Another listener could lead to more.
Hopefully.
Well, hopefully,
Go
yeah.
tell all your friends.
That's it. It's word of mouth, and word of mouth is a powerful tool.
My favorite ones are when somebody live tweets as they're binge listening things, especially actual plays. I've been trying to do it because I've been binging a couple of my friends' podcasts. So I finish an episode or two because I'm at work while I'm doing it, so I can't necessarily constantly be posting. But I'll take my break and be like, "Oh my god, I'm on episode 3, and what the hell is happening? And this is so good, and blah 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 blah." And I'm shouting them out, and then that gives them free advertisement as well. And then I just keep doing it because I keep listening, and I'm just like, "This is so good, guys! Have you seen this?" Specifically, lately was the Birdhouse Mysteries, The Last Tapestries, and now Tales of Asperon.
I'm a fan of the Birdhouse Mysteries. Great show, great people. And I need to learn restraint. Maybe I tend to do the sort of the 3-day weekend splurge of sort of the follow Friday, support Saturday, and whatever Sunday technically is, or self promotion. I can't remember which way around it works. But by doing that, I hope that yes, we put a bit about ourselves, but we are able to draw the eye on so many other fantastic shows. And at times, people put up these huge long lists that potentially no one's really looking through.
I'm gonna be honest. If I'm on a really long list, I just like it and mute it because, like, thanks. But there's been times where I've been put on a list and they don't. Obviously, I'm not rememberable to them because they put me on the list twice. They forgot I was on the list already.
So I try and sort of keep those sort of posts more condensed, so it's either for a specific show or maybe a specific game system, potentially sort of, hashtag Vamly for the Vampire the Masquerade World of Darkness stuff if they've got an event going on, or it could be something D&D related, Savage Worlds related, such as the Birdhouse Mysteries and a few other shows and actual plays, Twitch streams and things that I've enjoyed or would like to see. I personally would like to support more, but have only one pair of eyes and one pair of ears, unfortunately, and only limited time in a day.
And I will say that your show might not be the right answer for people when they're looking for a new show. I've seen people like, hey, I'm looking for an LGBTQ plus, mostly YouTube show. And I'm like, okay, why don't you go listen to the Chosen Ones? Because that doesn't fit me. Or I'm looking for a fun horror game that is kind of visual and like really heavy acting. Okay, well, go listen to Tales from 2000s. Like, I might not fit everything. That's perfectly fine. Like, shout out your friends, shout out other shows that you've listened to that you think fit that criteria.
Yeah, definitely. And we, we're very self-aware in the fact that we won't tick everybody's box. Not every interview we do will have an audience as the same audience for. Not everybody wants to hear about this game system or this creative content creator. So we'll have spikes on certain episodes. But if people come back and discover one other content creator or TTRPG system or editor or whoever it might be, then hopefully we've helped the guest because they've taken their time to come on, and we've helped the person that might be looking for a new system or advice getting into content creation, or maybe they just enjoy our attempt at actual play that we are still refining and working on. So when our show doesn't fit, as you mentioned, we try and push towards the shows that do fit. Maybe it's individual people. It could be individuals. It could be shows. It could be support networks. I think so. We try and not be everything to everybody because we know we can't be, but hopefully we know the right person for someone.
Or you hear me out. You could do like 6,000 shows, edit them all, and just have something for everybody. There's totally enough times in the hours in the day to do that.
Totally. So when we start finish with this, we will start recording something new, and we'll go from there. Is that your suggestion?
Yes. I mean, there has been weekends where it was like that, where I'm literally like, okay, we literally got 2.5 hours, guys. Then no, we got to go. Like, I have a meeting at 2:30. We need to. It's 12:17, and we got a 2-hour episode to record. And then like the next day, I recorded 3 times. Like the Sunday when we recorded our first episode for Awfully Queer Heroes, where I was DMing, I had a recording right after that, and then a recording for someone else's show a little bit later on the same day. And sometimes it just works out like that, like it just happens. I think for me, I know my limitations, and I've only hit that limitation 2 or 3 times. And it was usually because I was forcing myself to do basically double in order to take a break the next week. So there was 1 week before Thanksgiving specifically, I was recording or participating in 8 different things.
That's a lot.
And then I found out my audio messed up in a thing, and I had to fix the audio for that. So then we had to record another again. And so I had a 9th thing. And that was all in 7 days.
Wow.
And it was exhausting. And I almost burnt out. The other time that I almost burnt out was the weekend I did the charity stream. But it wasn't necessarily because of this. It was because I had to plan all that. I was trying to hit affiliate so that we could get money on the stream. And then I had to prepare for DMing it and then actually run it. So it was a 12-hour game. And then I had to go to work the next day on 5 hours of sleep.
Hmm.
Wasn't happy about it. So I was exhausted, but not just because of, oh, hey, I'm doing too much for the podcast, but because like, oh, hey, I have other life responsibilities too that I can't just sleep away.
Hmm.
But just be cautious of burnout.
Yeah, definitely.
Be aware of what your limit is. For me, I think my limit's a little higher because I use D&D and tabletop games in this podcast as a way to not have to think about my feelings. So if I'm always busy, I don't have to feel things, and then I don't have to have depression anymore. That's how that works.
I think that's how that works. I mean,
Yeah, totally.
I think it's medically based in there somewhere.
Yeah. Medicine and ignoring it. That's totally how it works.
That's like this podcast, the editing and stuff like that is a welcome distraction for me. So while it can have long hours and it can, I'm sure you've had the moments too where picking between 2 or 3 pieces of music for one section of an episode
Oh my god, yes.
becomes too, and you're like, what kind of vibe, what kind of feeling am I trying to put in behind this? Does it need to be?
I've literally said vibe so many times in the last week because of art.
Yeah,
I'm like, this art isn't really the vibe I'm going for this game. And I'm like, I don't even know what that means. And I felt so bad.
Yeah. Is this classical piece of music or this particular style of art? Is that what I want, or am I trying to put it across as something else? Is this going to engage with the audience? Is this going to?
Does this portray the gloom and suspense that I need, or does it feel too happy?
Yes.
Oh, it feels too happy. Okay, maybe this one. Oh no, that's too upbeat. Oh, okay.
It's a strange coincidence you say that. I was editing, so coming out this week, I think, on day of recording is our sort of part 5 of 5 from our Alien playthrough, and I had that exact mental sort of block where it was like, what music is this music too happy for this particular bit? So I'm scrolling through all the different things I've got from, like, we've paid out for a license for Epidemic Sounds, so I have an internet's worth of music library to scroll through and check, and stuff I've already downloaded, and I'm like, my brain is starting to cook off now because I can't choose one piece of music and a sound effect that goes behind 30 seconds of dialogue.
Oh, and adding sound effects sometimes, like there are some shows that add sound effects and it's just perfection because like it's little things like the door opening or a fire crackling in the background or the sound of people talking or plates clattering because you're in a tavern, and it just makes it feel realistic, but also it can be overdone, and if you have to be conscientious of it.
Yeah, definitely.
I use sound effects sometimes, but I will admit I do not do it every time because I usually just forget that sound effects exist. And then I'm like, then usually it's like, I think I got an hour and 15 minutes through something. And then I'm like, I want to add sound effects. Damn it. I need to go back and add sound effects now. So I had to go back and like scroll through because it was like a horror episode. I think that was the Call of Cthulhu episode. And I'm like, okay, let me just add a door sound whenever somebody opens a door, and let me add the sound of a bed creaking and the floors creaking and stuff like that. But it adds a little bit. The one thing though I will say, be nice to your listeners. Do not make it too loud.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Not only is it bad for people wearing headphones, but there are actually people who have a super negative side effect if it's something is too loud suddenly. Like they have the music at a normal level and it's at the level they can handle, and then you suddenly like blow an air horn in their ear type of loud. Not only are you going to possibly startle them, but there are people who are like, I went into a panic attack afterwards, I've heard.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
just
it's
be aware. Make it a little quieter. Just a little bit.
that's it. It's called background music for and sort of sound effects because it is background and an effect. It is not the production.
Mm-hmm.
So and that's another thing we've learnt, or I have learnt, to dial back on in places. I was like, every minute must have at least a couple of episodes, every minute had to have some sort of music behind it, or an effect that tied this scene to that scene. And I think I've learned to restrain myself and just introduce it when there's a subtle shift in tone, or a scene change, or as you mentioned, that odd creaky door, or whatever it is, just to add that flavor and sort of more immersion to the listening experience.
So what's funny is for Clearlight, I literally use about 3 songs. That's it.
Nice.
2 I have made personally for me, so that did cost money. But I have an Outside the City Walls song or background. I have an Inside the City, and I have a Fighting. Those are my 3 that I use constantly for Clearlight. But then when I was editing Queens of Light's Last Stand, which is a show that at episode I DM'd recently and is going out on the 11th of March, I looked for like 6 or 7 or 8 different songs because like I wanted there to be like, it was focused on the feeling of the game. It was very RP focused, very tense, gloomless, trying to kill them, like that type of vibe. And there were moments where it's like, oh, it's a happy dream. Oh, nope, it's not a dream. Nope, it's bad. It's bad. Nope, it's bad. And then like there was a fight stuff, and then like I tried to add different songs for a little bit of everything, but I think I ended up with like 5 or 6 songs in that one, which was absurd for me. I'm just like, that's a lot.
Going back to your point of using 3, it gives the listener a definite sort of almost subliminal or subconscious audio cue as to set the scene. So having that consistency is no bad thing. We, and I'm sure you and many other podcasts and shows do the same, we have a consistent intro and outro. And while we may, depending on what game we're running, that intro and outro will be different to other games to differentiate it. For each episode, it will be consistent.
I need to update my outro, actually, now that I think about it.
Note to self. So, we try and use those audio cues. So when you hear our interview music, if you clicked on that episode by mistake because you wanted to listen to an actual play, or there was a promo you wanted to listen to for one of the many fantastic shows that are out there, including yours, Nikki, that as soon as the music starts, you're like, oh, it's an interview. Whose interview? Oh, it's with this guest. Okay, well, maybe I don't want to listen to this one today, this week, this month, whatever it is. I wanted to listen to skip. Right, there's the intro I was looking for either our D&D campaign, which is on a bit of a hiatus, our Alien campaign that's sort of one-shot playthrough that's finishing this week, or whatever else it is that our team, as we are putting out. You can instantly hear that audio cue and know what you're listening to.
Yeah, I will also say that if you have more than one show on one podcast, have different art for it. But also on Spotify, you can make playlists, which is what I did. As long as you remember to update them, which I forget to do all the time. As long as you remember to update them, the playlist will be updated. Somebody can follow that playlist. So let's say I have a couple of people who listen who only prefer to listen to the discussions. And that's fine. But whatever. Like, I'm not mad about that. That's still a listener.
Absolutely.
And I can update that Spotify list to say, hey, we have a new discussion episode. Or most of the time they just remember that it's on Mondays and they go and look because it's every Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then I have a Beholder to One Shot Spotify list where all of our one shots were. Or we have a Clearlight one where you can listen to all of the episodes of Clearlight, one right after the other. You can binge it if you want to, instead of having to go, okay, well, in order to get to the next Clearlight episode, I need to skip Monday, Thursday, Monday. I have to skip 3 episodes to get to the next Clearlight episode. Now you could just listen to the whole 20 hours of episodes in one sitting.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I'm going to have to look into.
It's really easy.
I'm sure it is, but it's one of those things. Until somebody mentions it, I hadn't really thought about it. Everyone's like, oh, where can we find your podcast? Well, we're on iTunes, we're on Spotify, we're on pretty much wherever Buzzsprout can offer to push us out onto.
Yeah.
But without understanding things like the Spotify playlists, that's something I'm going to have to look into as a personal development to try and remember to to update.
Yeah, I end up what I do is when I share the newest episode, I put the link to the newest episode, usually from like Podbean, which is where we upload. And then I'm like, but if you haven't listened, here's the list for Spotify. You can listen to the last 13 episodes if you haven't caught up. So that way they have, or if I'll be like, hey, by the way, on Thursday, the newest episode of Behold Clearlight's coming out. If you haven't caught up, here's a link that you can go listen to it. So that's what I use them for. Or if somebody's like, oh, I'm interested in listening to your podcast, I'm like, okay, do you have a preference? Do you want to listen to discussions, one-shots, actual play? Oh, no, I don't have a preference. Okay, here's a link. Just a straight link to my podcast. If they have a preference, okay, here's the link to that.
Well,
I have them all saved in my Discord channel, so I don't have to go find them again.
Which is also something that is recommended, but not a necessity for a podcast, but somewhere to invite listeners and other friends of the community to come and engage is a Discord server. We have one, and it is more functional towards playing and organizing games than it is for general socializing, but that's something that I want to change in the future as we continue to grow and meet new people and invite new people in, sort of build that community in and around it and tie that into the projects we're doing. So I run games on separate channels on there for different systems, but other than that, at the moment it's a sort of launch pad for other things rather than a social hub like so many others, including yourself, have.
Yeah, I actually have two. One for recording only, and there's a lot of people in here, but like there's minimal chatter. It's if you're chatting, it's usually because we're in a game. You know that if you're in this server, you are having them recorded, so don't come into the room, like that kind of situation. But then I also have a public one that I'm more open with share. Like I share that one with people outside of just, hey, I want to record. And that's the one that I use mostly, which actually I'll have the Discord link put in the description down below for our public server. You are more than welcome to join us.
I'd recommend it.
We just chit chat. We say hi a lot and good morning.
Yes, there is a lot of discussion of how the day is going, but no, it's a great Discord server to be a part of. I've enjoyed sort of getting to know people on your server and you as well, because you're posting on there, and I know not every Discord server is able to have the creators, as it were, as active as maybe yourself and others are. But
yeah,
it's good fun.
So the last thing that I'll mention before we go to our closing stuff is that we are working together on stuff in Awfully Queer Heroes.
We are.
I am officially DMing for about 3 months a series called Uncaged. It's a set of books that are available on the DMs Guild, and I'm using volume 1 currently, and we're going to just go through a bunch of modules, and I'm going to find a way to get this ragtag group of friends, strangers, 3 rogues and a paladin. It's fun.
It's a lot of fun. You're doing really. You're a great DM, and I'm sure that the listeners to your shows will obviously stand by me and agree with me on that front. But you did an excellent job corralling the 4 of us into any kind of logical sequence of events. So I take my hat off to you there.
I still have to figure out some books, but I had to stop that real quick. But yes, if you want to listen to that should be being posted soon, first episode. And after the 3-ish months that's posted, we will be going on to our main story, which will be done or DM'd by, I believe, Jamie as of the moment. So yeah, I'm really excited for it. Like I decided to step into this role because this is the first time that I'll be recording longer than a one shot. And I've been very nervous about that. So this was kind of like a step, like a small step into doing it. It's like, okay, well, if I can do a 3-month thing, maybe I can do a 6-month thing. If I can do a 6-month thing, maybe I can do a 12-month thing. And like slowly build myself into proving that okay, I can do this.
Hmm.
But yeah, like if you are new to this, just give it a shot. Try it. If it doesn't work out, then it doesn't work out. I will say, if you ever receive negative commentary, do not react to it negatively.
Hmm.
That will quickly go out of hand really quick. But if you are told something like learn from those mistakes, if you make a mistake, learn from it and improve. But yeah, so any last closing words?
I definitely speak for myself, and potentially if you just sort of piggybacking onto that point you raised there, that please provide feedback. Reviews may only take a minute, but a review will help either buoy the team and give them confidence in what they're doing is being enjoyed, or if there is feedback, constructive, hopefully, then you know we're Snyders Return are always open to constructive feedback. We have had recording issues on a couple of episodes, which we have sort of made listeners aware of ahead of time. But you know, if you're enjoying our content, or if you would like us to try something else, and I'm sure this applies to most podcasts. If we're doing something right, please let us know. And if we're doing something you don't enjoy, then let us know in a nice way so that we can work on it.
But also be willing to accept no thank you if you just are like, hey, I think you should play another system. Like, don't play D&D. You should switch to Starfinder. You're probably gonna get no, I like this game. It's fine. We're good. And don't get mad at them for saying no.
If you want a Starfinder campaign, I can recommend a couple of shows. Some really great shows, friends of our show and great people in the community. As we mentioned earlier, between the pair of us and our friends in the community, we can help steer people towards the content that they are looking for if it's not with us. But if you have enjoyed any of what we do as separate shows, then tell people. And thank you.
Leave a review on iTunes, 5 stars. I haven't seen it go up in like 2 months and it's making me sad. No, but seriously, where can people find you?
We are on, where are we? We're on Twitter. We've mentioned that quite a lot. So you can find us at Return Snyder. So it's our name backwards because I couldn't fill out the form properly. So it's at Return Snyder. We also have an Instagram. We have a link tree in our Twitter profile. We have a Facebook page, which is Snyders Return. You'll just get, at the moment, again, it's another community we're still trying to balance and learn with, but we get updates of new releases and projects and things going on from there. You can find us on iTunes, Google Podcasts. I'm trying to think what it's actually called. Google Play, I think. Spotify, pretty much every podcast app going. And we are just out there in the ether as well. So Twitter is the best place to get in contact with us at Return Snyder. So again, thank you, Nikki, for having us on.
Yeah, no problem. It was fun. All those links that were just mentioned will be down in the description box below. Also, you know the drill, but you can find me on Twitter mostly at Beholder to No One. I am not active on Facebook, so don't go looking there because I will not be there. Also, if you are interested in supporting the show, we do have a Patreon and a Ko-Fi, or Coffee, or whatever, how you pronounce it. Be our next patron. We are going to be sharing some behind-the-scenes sneak peeks as we unlock what we're doing with Adam as a DM in the Vampire the Masquerade game. And we're just going to share some bloopers, and I'm going to try to be a little bit more active there. But yeah, that money helps support us paying for the cost that it does cost to run this podcast. So I appreciate every single one of our patrons. And if you haven't already, check out our website, beholdertoknoone.com. It was created by my husband, Keith, who plays Seuss in Behold Clearlight. And if you like it, maybe, just maybe, he can make you one too, if you want to pay him. But yeah, that's about it. Check out all the other episodes. Check out Adam down below. Check us out in Awfully Queer Heroes, which as soon as I have that link, I will be sharing the crap out of it. And yeah, have a great day, guys. Bye.